Yes, you read that right. This is a two-part project vlog. Hello everyone, this is just going to be a really quick introduction because I'm aware this video is way too long already, but I feel a need to justify uploading what's essentially a feature-length film about knitting in two parts. So look, when I started filming this project vlog, I knew it would be long and I knew there was a possibility that I would have to split it into parts. I think I even said it at the start of the video, but it's like I didn't really grasp that that could really happen. Like in my mind, it was only a possibility and not a reality. And now that we're here and this is a reality, I just feel a need to explain myself. What it boils down to is that 50% of the work of this project vlog was the filming and 49% of it was the editing, and the last 1% is the uploading. Once I had filmed it all, I was always going to edit it, even if I was the only one who ever saw it. This is a really monumental project for me and I just wanted to have the footage and the final project vlog so that I could watch it back and kind of remember the whole process, especially from those first few weeks and months when I put most of the work in. And then once it was edited, that was 99% of the work done, and all I had to do was upload it, and there was no cost to me to upload it, so I just figured why not? It's already there, I'll upload it, and if people don't want to watch it, they don't have to, that's fine. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. If you do watch it, a big thank you, and I hope you enjoy it. I am incredibly proud of this vlog. I enjoyed editing it and watching it back. I was actually entertained, and that is saying something because I find it very difficult to watch my regular podcast episodes. I just find it very awkward to watch myself on camera, but when editing this video I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing all of the things that I got up to while I was working on this jumper, and just being able to kind of relive those memories was really nice. One thing I'm not happy about is the quality of the sound, so I just filmed with whatever I had to hand, whether it be my phone, my tablet, my camera, or my lapel mic, and I didn't give too much thought to that. I didn't think it was something I had to give any thought to, but editing it back, the sound quality just changes a lot throughout the video. It's not necessarily bad, but it is noticeable, so it can be, at least when I was editing it, I found it a little bit jarring, and I did try to fix it as much as possible, but I'm not a sound engineer, so I couldn't get it all normalised. I am currently filming another project vlog at the moment, so that one will be the same, but after that, any project vlogs that I do in the future, I'll definitely work on getting the sound quality better. Okay, enough of that. Here's part one of my Aidan jumper project vlog. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches and Stem YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and today I have a project vlog for you. This is going to be my first ever project vlog. I usually do podcast episodes, exclusively podcast episodes. I've done a few planning videos, but I've never done a project vlog, and recently I've really been enjoying watching project vlogs. And for this project it's pretty significant because I'm going to be self-drafting my own cabled jumper. I'm not designing the cabled jumper, so it's based off a design, and I feel like it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time, and I just thought it'd be fun to document the process. I am wearing my running gear. It brings me one step closer to actually going for a run because I hate running, but I just do it because I know it's good for me. So that is my plan for today, but we'll see if that actually happens. But first I want to talk about the jumper that I'm copying, for lack of a better word. I have this Aran jumper that belonged to my granddad. There is a label, Innisfree knitwear, 100% wool, made in Ireland, and it's a size extra large, so that is a big reason of why I'm recreating this. This is far too big for me. It's too big, the sleeves are too long, the body is too long, and it's also quite open and airy, so even though it's warm, even though it's a very rustic wool, when I wear it I feel like there's wind floating through the gaps in the stitches and stuff, so I just feel like I could recreate this, and I would actually be able to wear it. It would be a more practical item to have in my wardrobe than this, although I will obviously keep this. This is a very special jumper, so I'm going to keep this. I just don't wear it, and it's inspired me to create something that I will wear. The elephant in the room, it might not be obvious, or maybe it is, but this big panel here. And if you are very sharp-sighted, you'll notice that the sleeve cuffs are also looking a bit funny. Unfortunately, this jumper was the subject of a moth attack. Happened maybe 4 years ago, so before I started knitting, but while I was still crocheting, and it sounds really naive, but I didn't really realise that we had moths in Ireland. Or if I did, I associated it with moths being in like really old houses with lots of old carpets and real animal fur coats and all this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? You know, the thing that I'm just... You can picture what I'm talking about. So I didn't expect moths to be in a young person's bedroom. and this jumper was kind of stuffed away in a corner. Obviously I never wore it, and one day I was cleaning out my room, pulled it out, and I noticed that it was just covered in holes, and my first thought was actually that it had gotten tangled in something in that corner and it had gotten caught in something, and you know, that's what created the holes, because I was still like, we don't have moths in Ireland. Eventually I rooted around and found little larva casings, and there was loads of them, and I didn't know what they were. They're like 1 centimeter long. They looked like rolled up pieces of dust. Took them and put them under the window to look at them more closely, and then they started wriggling and things started crawling out of them, and that confirmed my worst fears. I was devastated about this jumper, but at the same time I knew I only had myself to blame, and since then I've been like super vigilant about moths. Pleased to say I haven't had any serious moth infestations since. I do see the odd one, but they don't live very long when I'm around. Let's talk more about this jumper. So this belongs to my granddad. My granddad passed away when I was 4, but I do have very strong memories. Unfortunately, most of those strong memories are like sad ones. So he died of cancer, and I remember being told over and over again that he was sick. I remember being told that he has a stone in his stomach because he had pancreatic cancer, and I suppose that was the best way that my parents and my aunties and uncles and my nana could explain it to me. I remember drawing a picture in school of my granddad with a stone in his stomach. I can't remember, some kind of homework assignment must have been, and I decided to draw that. And I remember showing up to his house after he had died and being told that he was no longer there. So unfortunately I have some pretty sad memories, but sorry, this is a very grim. Although I don't have clear happy memories, it's almost like there's a subconscious happiness when I think back to my granddad. I got along very well with him. I was the firstborn girl on that side of my family, so he had a special place in his heart for me and I for him, and we got along very well. I developed a love of spare ribs from him. There's a photo I have of the two of us sitting on the sofa, me with my feet just sticking out the end of the sofa because I was only like 3 or 4, and we're both eating ribs and I've got barbecue sauce all over my face. Very fond of that photo, very fond of ribs. So I was given this jumper a long time ago, and it is, as you can see, a Aran cabled jumper. I didn't actually explain what this was, so there were so many holes in the front of this panel and I didn't know how to knit, but I was like, I'm going to learn how to knit so I can fix that. And you might think, oh, that's so nice, she learned to knit and then she fixed her granddad's jumper. I actually didn't. I just put off learning to knit for so long, and eventually my mum, as part of a birthday present, got this repaired for me, because my mum doesn't knit either, so she got this repaired for me. One thing that I don't know if this was intentional is that they did what I now know to be some kind of half twisted rib on the cuff, and I don't know if I love that. It's funny because I didn't think anything of this middle panel when I got this jumper repaired because I didn't know anything about knitting, but as you'll see, the back is actually a honeycomb cable, and so I can understand why they didn't do a honeycomb cable. If they do know how to do a honeycomb cable, it's just very tedious. So I can understand why they did this. It looks like a double moss stitch. But yeah, in an ideal world, I would find this exact same yarn, this cream Donegal tweed, and I would reknit this with the honeycomb panel, and I would also reknit the cuffs because I would just want it to be all cohesive. Even though I'm not going to wear it, as I say, it would just be nice to have it all be one cohesive pattern. Sorry, I'm not really in frame. I'm new to this whole vlogging thing. I think this would be pretty straightforward to replicate. I'm going to show the back panel because the back is actually what I want to replicate. I don't want to do double moss stitch or double seed stitch or whatever it's called in my replication of the jumper. I want to do the original honeycomb panel. There's a lot of honeycomb in this jumper. There's also some on the sleeve. There's a wide honeycomb panel there. Sorry. And then there's a single column of honeycomb down the side, but I do think it's lovely, and I love how the honeycombs are broken up with this twisting cable as well. So the honeycomb cable is on the middle, and then there's diamonds on either side with reverse stuck net. I'm going to keep it that way, and then there are these 2x2 cables that make up kind of the rest of the cable structure. There's also this column of knit stitches, and then on the side we have some double seed stitch again. So that's the gist of this. My plan is to do a drop shoulder jumper. So I'm going to start off with a basic trapezoid shape. I'll increase with short rows. Will I? No, I'll increase with increases. And then I'll continue the back panel. Once the back reaches the underarm point, I'll pick up at the front shoulders and work down the front shoulders. The bit I think is going to be complicated for me is shaping the neck hole. I think I'm just going to take a jumper that I already own and measure it and try and copy that. But before I do any of that, the first thing I need to do is make a gauge swatch. So I will show you the yarn that I'm going to use. So this yarn is from Explorer Knits and Fibres. It's their Rockies DK base, which is 100% merino DK, and the colour is Avid Noir, which is really, really deep, cool toned purple. I think it looks navy on camera, but in person it's definitely a little bit more purple. So this is in yards, which I don't speak yards. It's 274 yards in 100 grams, but I remember looking this up and I think it was around 250 meters, which in my opinion is quite a light DK. I feel like that's a lot of yardage for 100 grams. So, and even looking at the strand, I do feel like it's thinner than a lot of DK weight yarns that I'm working with. In this project vlog, I want to talk about how I'm figuring out how to make it myself. So I want to show the process of swatching and doing up the calculations to figure out how many stitches to cast on, how many to increase by for the trapezoid shape at the back, how many stitches to have in the body, in the sleeves, etc, etc. So I think the first thing we'll do is wind this up and get swatching, which I'm really excited for. I've been holding this back because I knew I wanted to record this and show it on camera. So although I have been itching to swatch this, I've been holding it back for this moment. So I'm so excited that we finally get to do that together. So I'm going to do my swatch on 3.5mm needles. I would have ideally liked to do it on 4mm needles because if I eventually do release this as a pattern, I think the 4mm will just be a lot more appealing to a lot of knitters, especially because this is all over cables. I think that will just be quite a lot to do on 3.5mm, but I do think that this yarn is going to be a little bit too thin to work on 4mm needles and get a gauge that I'm happy with. So I'm going to go 3.5 and we'll see how it turns out. So for the sake of swatching, I'm going to do one large swatch with 3 different stitch patterns. So I'm going to do the honeycomb pattern, I'm going to include the diamond, and I'm going to include the double moss stitch. If you're a completely new knitter and you're wondering how I know that this is what kind of diamond cable this is or what kind of cable this is, because I mentioned that this is a 2x2, you can actually just count the stitches there. So there's one stitch here, there's another column of stitches here, this one is kind of hidden under there, so that's the 3rd stitch across that cable row. And then there's a 4th stitch there, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a 4 stitches across, so it's 2x2. As for the diamond, it's a lot easier to figure out because you can very clearly see that there's just 2 columns of stitches going up the side of the diamond here. These are just things that I've learned from doing a lot of cable patterns. So if you're a beginner knitter and you want to be able to identify these things yourself, just keep practicing with different types of patterns, expose yourself to different cable patterns, and you'll start to notice these things yourself. But this cable here is going to be 2 stitches crossed over 1, I think. So you would cross 2 stitches over 1 and you would knit the 2 and purl the 1, and then the direction that you want your cable to go in would determine whether those 2 go in front or behind of the 1. And then as for the honeycomb, it's a 2x2 honeycomb pattern, and you can see the 4 stitches there. So there's 1, I'm holding my phone with one hand so this is kind of difficult, but so my needle has picked up 2 columns of stitches there. That's 1 and 2, 3 and 4. So the honeycomb is formed by 2x2 cables, and that's basically all the cables on this jumper. Last thing I want to mention that I've just noticed now is that I was kind of wondering how many stitches to actually cast on for the diamond cable. This I find quite difficult to count. I'm sure I could if I really sat down and focused on it, but I'm just using the ribbing as cheating. So each of these knit and purl columns corresponds to 1 stitch in the panel above. So I'm just counting the stitches that are in the ribbing. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, and then that knit stitch becomes a knit column or something. Anyway, let's go with 16. Another way that I've just found it a little bit easier to do is to turn the whole jumper inside out and count the knit stitches, but then also account for the fact that the diamond cable is 2 extra stitches on each side. So if I count the visible knit columns, I've got 1, 12, and then the diamond will be 2 here, or 2 here, and 2 here. So 12 plus 4 is 16. So I'm going to cast on 16 for the diamond, 16 for the honeycomb, and I'm going to cast on 16 as well for the double moss stitch. So in total, I will cast on 48. But just to give myself a bit of buffer, I'm actually going to go all the way up to 60 stitches. So I'm going to cast on 60 for my swatch. I did say this was going to be a big swatch, so I'll probably be here for a little while working on this. If you're wondering how I'm recording hands-free, it's with this very high-tech device. I got this a long time ago, again before I started knitting, but I was crocheting and I was posting a lot of reels on Instagram, and I got this so I could film myself crocheting, and I haven't used it since, so I'm glad that it's come in handy again. So it's been a few days since I last recorded, but I have finished my swatch, so I wanted to show it. I did most of it that first day. I think I worked up until about here, and then last night I just decided to add another half of this diamond just to get a good bit of height in the swatch. So it is quite large, but I didn't find it tedious at all. I really thought I would get bored of it. I usually do get bored of swatches, and especially because this is twice the width of a normal swatch and it's all cables, I thought I would really struggle to get it finished, but I quite enjoyed it actually, and it's given me a bit of hope for the jumper itself. Two observations that I'm kind of getting from this are my gauge is quite tight. I think it's like 26 stitches, and this is before blocking, so I suspect it will grow. But the fact that I originally bought this yarn to make the Moby sweater by Petite Knit, which has a gauge of 21 stitches, is kind of laughable to me now, because there's no way I would get close to 21 stitches on this yarn. It's definitely for the best that I'm using it for something else. I also think that if I do eventually release this as a pattern, I will definitely want to make the gauge bigger, maybe closer to 23 or 22 stitches in 10 centimeters. I just think it will definitely make it more appealing to beginner knitters, especially, or advanced beginners. I don't think this project would be suitable for a complete beginner, but definitely for advanced beginners or people looking to kind of make their first Aran jumper if they've already worked cables or something. That's kind of my goal for this, and I do think that a larger gauge would just be more appealing. But for this sample that I'm making for myself, I really like this fabric and I love this colour. It's worked up so well and I'm just obsessed. I can't wait to actually start working on this now. But yeah, first I need to block this. The other thing is that this is a superwash wool, and I think you can tell by the stitches, like actually on the back it's more noticeable because it's doing that thing where one leg of the V is like a vertical line, and I don't like that look, but obviously that's on the back so it's fine. But it's just kind of confirmed to me that if I do make a second sample for a pattern release, I would want it to be on a rustic or non-superwash wool. So yes, that is my swatch, and now I will block it. So I've measured my gauge, and taking the entire gauge swatch from one end to the other, it's giving me an average gauge of 25 stitches in 10 centimeters. But I know that my honeycomb cable stitch is a lot tighter, so I measured that one as well, and that's working out at 28 stitches in 10 centimeters. And just for argument's sake, I also measured the diamond panel and the moss stitch all in one, and I got 22 stitches in 10 centimeters. So I've got three gauges that I'm working with, but the most important one I think will be overall, and then the honeycomb cable will come into it at some point. So the first thing I want to do is figure out how much ease I want in my jumper, and I've just used other jumpers that I own, both ones that I've knit or bought, and I've decided that I want 15 centimeters of positive ease in this jumper. So for me, 15 centimeters of positive ease means a circumference of 105 centimeters. Using my gauge of 25 stitches in 10 centimeters, I'll be able to figure out how many stitches I should have in the total body. To figure out this question mark, I need to do to 25 what I do to 10 to get to 105. So I'll explain that. So to go from 10 to 105, we multiply by 10.5. So I'll multiply 25 by 10.5, and that gives me 262.5. Now obviously we can't have 0.5 of a stitch, so we'll need to round that, but first I want to check that the rest of my numbers fit into that. So let's assume that I could have 262.5 stitches in the total body. That's also taken into account the stitches that I'll cast on under the arm. From what I've read online, and I just want to make a disclaimer, I don't know what I'm doing. This is not a tutorial. This is my process for figuring out how I'm going to make this jumper fit me. So please do not take this as a tutorial to design a pattern. I'm just going off the fact that for me, knitting is a lot of maths and there's a lot of numbers, and numbers don't lie, and as long as you do your calculations correctly, things should work out. So that's what I'm going off. The reason I said that was because I did look online to figure out how many stitches to cast on under the arm, and a general guideline at this gauge was about 8 stitches. If I'm casting on 8 stitches under each arm, that's an extra 16 stitches in total, because 8 multiplied by 2 is 16. So to figure out how many stitches I need to have in my body before casting on those 16 stitches, I need to subtract it from 262.5, and that is 246.5. And if I round it to 246 divided by 2, I get 123. And I would like an even number, I just would. So I'm going to try 248 instead, and I get 124, which is a much nicer number. I'm going to construct this jumper like a typical drop shoulder, and when I say typical, I just mean typical of the drop shoulder patterns that I've made before, where you cast on for the back neck. You make this trapezoid shape either by increasing or by doing German short rows to reach the widest point at the back yoke, at which point you'll start knitting straight down until you reach the underarm, and then you'll cast on your extra stitches here, which is going to be 8 for me, and you join to the front yoke, which is going to be in the front there. So I hope that makes some kind of sense, but basically by the time I get to this point here, I'm going to want 124 stitches, and I need to figure out how many stitches to cast on at the back neck here. Just to make life simple for myself, I'm going to make it so that if I were to take a vertical line and bring it down from each end of my cast on edge, this whole panel is going to be honeycomb. I know that my honeycomb gauge is 28 stitches in 10 centimeters. So I also need to decide how wide I want this part. And again, I was just looking at resources online, and the answer I got was about 16 centimeters for my size. I need to figure out how many stitches is 16 centimeters in this honeycomb pattern. So if we have 28 stitches in 10 centimeters, how many stitches do we have in 16 centimeters? To get from 10 to 16, you multiply it by 1.6. To get from 28 to this question mark, multiply by 1.6, and the answer is 44.8. So again, we'll need to round that, but in this case, I also want to take into account my honeycomb pattern. So my honeycomb cable happens over 8 stitches, which means I need a multiple of 8 here. 44.8 is not a multiple of 8, neither is 44. The nearest multiples of 8 are 40 and 48. So again, I'm just going to figure out, using my gauge, how wide that back neck cast on would be if I cast on 40 stitches versus if I cast on 48 stitches. To get from 28 to 40, you multiply by roughly 1.4. It's not exactly 1.4, but it's around that. So 10 multiplied by 1.4 is 14. And I think 14 centimeters would be a little bit too narrow for my liking. So let's check 48. So to get from 28 to 48, you multiply by, again, roughly 1.7, not exactly, but roughly. Multiplying 10 by 1.7, we get 17. And 17 is much more in line with what I would like for my back neck. So I'm going to go with 17 centimeters, which means that I'm going to cast on 48 stitches. And I want to figure out how many stitches that means I'll be increasing by. So 124 minus 48 is 76. So in this trapezoid, I'll be adding 76 stitches. In all, or at least most of the drop shoulder patterns that I've done, they've increased by 2 stitches on each row. So that means I'll be increasing by 76 divided by 2, which is 38. So 38 stitches on each side. And that also means that I'll be increasing over 38 rows. And yeah, so I think that's my back panel calculation. I'm pretty happy with that.
Here I'm using Stitch Fiddle to map out my back yoke, and if you haven't heard of Stitch Fiddle, it's a website where you can design knitting charts. So it can be used for cables, lace, colour work, and it can be used for crochet as well. I designed my press skull socks with Stitch Fiddle. There is a free version and a paid version, and everything that you see here is done with the free version, but for the actual pattern release I ended up getting the paid version just so I could have more capabilities with designing these charts. I also decided before making this chart that I would use German short rows to shape the back yoke instead of increases, so that's why those curvy arrows are there. So here I was working out the chart, and there was actually a lot of trial and error just with the first few rows. Like row 1, I was struggling. There were a few speed bumps that I wouldn't have realised were a problem until I actually started to knit it. For example, I had a cable directly above a short row turn, which in reality was very difficult or rather impossible to knit. So here I was playing around with the starting row being right side or wrong side and trying to figure out what would work. Eventually I ended up setting it so that the chart started on a wrong side row instead of a right side row, and that seemed to work out. For the rest of the chart, my approach was to add the cables in first and just add in everything else around those.
This is how much of my tail I have left, and I still have 20 stitches to cast on, so let's start again. So I've cast on again, and I did get my 24 stitches this time. I used a long tail cast on, and I actually have a really long tail left now. Can you see? I feel like I might be playing yarn chicken with this, and I know this is kind of a short amount in comparison to all of the yarn that I have, but I do hate wasting a lot of yarn. I have 124 stitches and I want to work exclusively on the 48 in the middle, so I subtracted 48 from 124 and that's 76 I think, and then divided by 2, which is 38. So I'm going to slip 38 stitches from my left needle to my right needle, and then I will be able to work on that center back neck. So at this point I'm realising that I have made a mistake, as I knew I would inevitably, and I didn't even count the stitches that are in my Granddad's jumper, and I've just counted them now because I've reached kind of the maximum width of my back panel and I'm still missing another 2x2 cable at the very end, and then there's like a panel of moss stitch as well. I'm missing about 20 stitches, but I've just counted the stitches in my Granddad's jumper and it's definitely more than 124. I don't know exactly how much, but I've already counted up to 100 and I haven't even counted the moss stitch panel at the side. The honeycomb panel in my Granddad's jumper is only 4 honeycombs, whereas mine is 6. So I could go down to 4, but the reason I did 6 was because I wanted the honeycomb panel to be the width of the back neck, but I don't think that has to be the case if I don't want it to be. So I could redo it and do 4. So maybe I'll just do that. I'm going to think about this for a few days. I've worked on this enough.
Okay, the audio got really bad, so I'm just going to record a quick voiceover. In this clip, I am extending the chart and then adding in what's missing. There's not enough stitches in the chart to add everything, but I just added it in anyway to see how many stitches I'd need. So I added in an extra 2x2 cable and some moss stitch at the end. So if I add this in and reduce the honeycomb repeats from 6 to 4, I'll need 136 stitches, which is still too many. So I also decided to remove the 2x2 cable on the end.
Hello, I'm sorry about the angle. Today's the 13th of December. I just finished filming a podcast episode. I'm wearing my finished holly sweater by Pernille Larson. And I want to open my full-on 12 Days of Christmas Advent calendar. Full-on is an Irish jam/preserve company. And this 12 Day of Christmas Advent calendar has jams in it, which I think is really cute. I know the 12 Days of Christmas technically starts on Christmas Day, but I'm a grown woman and I'm making my own rules. I want to open these so that the last one I open on Christmas Eve, which means I need to open the first one today, and I want to make scones to put my jam on. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to follow a recipe from Good Food. I'll link it down below, or will I? I'll have a lot of stuff to link down below, I think, if this is going to be as long a vlog as I think it will be. But yeah, it's from Good Food. I think I have everything I need. I haven't even checked, but it's all basic ingredients. Come on now. This is supposed to be 4 centimeters deep, which I think it is, but the recipe also says that I should get 8 scones out of this. And I just don't see how I'm going to get 8 scones out of that. It's been a while since I last filmed. It's been a while since I last worked on this jumper. I just got really busy with test knits and gift knits and I just didn't get time to work on this. I was a bit frustrated because I really wanted to work on it over the Christmas period. I was telling myself all year that Christmas time would be when I worked on this jumper and it just didn't work out like that. But I've decided I just need to get over myself because that doesn't matter and I can knit this jumper whenever. So a few days ago I finally got around to frogging that yoke that I had knit and I restarted using my updated chart. And this is what we have. So, sorry the lighting is really bad, but I've finished the back yoke. I've done all the German short row shaping and I am delighted with how this is looking. I feel really proud of it. As it was working up, I was getting more and more motivated to finish it. So yeah, this is what we have. Especially like how these twisted stitches turned out. I think they gave a really kind of elegant and polished look to the 2x2 cable, and then they're on either side of the honeycomb panel. I think overall it just looks really, really good. I'm really happy with it. If I'm being totally honest, I was getting a little bit frustrated as well because I hadn't filmed in so long and I was thinking like that's going to be really weird in the vlog to just take a month-long break. But then again I decided that I needed to get over myself because the whole point of a project vlog is to show the honest process of knitting something. And if this project honestly takes a month-long break, then that's what I'm going to show on the project vlog. So now I will just keep working this part straight until I get to the point where I want to join under the arms, and I'll update you when I've made some more progress. Okay, so I have a small update. I've been working away on the back and you can see that I've made a good bit of progress after finishing the German short rows. I didn't like how small it was looking, so I decided to do a mid-project block and I've measured it and it's not ideal. It's actually a little bit small. If I were to continue with this, I think I would end up with a jumper that only has 5 centimeters of positive ease. So I don't know if I'm knitting tighter than I did during my gauge swatch, but regardless, I think I need to rip back and make it larger. And I've decided I'm not going to rip back the whole thing. I'm going to do something that's probably a bit sacrilegious. So if you're a purist knitter, look away now. I'm just going to rip back to where I ended the German short rows. And on this side, I still have my tail for my long tail cast on. I'm just going to cast on 10 extra stitches and go from there. But on this side, because I have nothing to extend it with, I'm going to actually cast on 10 stitches separately and transfer them onto the same needle and hope that I can just continue working the German short rows as if it was all part of the same cast on. There will be a bit of a gap, but I'm hoping it will be small enough that I can close it up with the yarn tails. I also didn't put in a lifeline after finishing the German short rows, and at the time I kind of was thinking I should probably put in a lifeline, and then I thought no, it'll be fine. And now I definitely realise I should have put in a lifeline, but it's okay. We're just gonna rip back carefully and we'll take our time with it. So I picked up stitches all across this piece. I don't do this too accurately. Like I know that I've picked up the wrong row in some parts, especially because when I picked up stitches at the start, I started pretty much at the point where the German short rows stop. On the other side, my needle came up a bit higher. See, it's coming out here, whereas it should have come out a little bit, about a centimetre lower. So I've definitely kind of moved up a couple of rows along the way, and I'm just going to take out the top needle now. I'm going to remove all of this yarn, and then once I get down to the point where my needle is, I'll be able to tidy it up and fix it properly. Here you can see that I'm just going stitch by stitch and picking up the correct row, and then I'm left with these tails of yarn at the back of my work. But once I get across to the end of the row and the correct row is picked up the whole way across, those tails will kind of disappear. updates, but they're not very good ones, I'm afraid. I blocked this back yoke once I had finished. It looks so good. But I just noticed that the shoulder slope was looking kind of steep. I just thought it looked steep. And I also found it odd that I only had to knit straight on the back for, this is only like 10 centimeters from here to here, to reach the full height of the back yoke from the back neck cast on to like the underarm point. The full height is about 26 centimeters and only 10 centimeters is knit straight. The other 16 centimeters is formed by the trapezoid shape, which is shaped by the German short rows. And I just thought that looked a bit out of proportion. So I tried it on, or I kind of put it against my back. It was really hard to measure it. So I put it against my sister's back, and the bottom of the shaping, so the last German short row was lining up with the armpit basically. So it was just going too deep too fast, and I kind of realised then like that I had been doing German short rows every 2 stitches. I'd been turning every 2 stitches after each turn, and I don't know why I did that. I think because I initially was going to shape the back yoke with increases, and every time I've shaped something with increases I've always increased every 2 stitches, so I just kind of translated that to German short rows. But other patterns that I've knit that use German short rows to shape the back, they don't necessarily do it every 2 stitches. They might do it 4, 5 or even 6 stitches. I was turning too frequently, which gave me this really steep shoulder, and I think it is a valid design choice, but it's not what I want for this jumper. And at first I was thinking, it's fine, I'll just wear it, I'll just keep it, but I just wouldn't be happy with it. And I've decided to rip it back and start again. And this time I've done the maths, and this time I'm going to do a German short row turn 3 stitches after each row. I'll show the maths that I used to calculate that as well. But yeah, I'm not going to film the whole process of knitting the back yoke again. So next time you see me, I'll have the back yoke done with my new calculations. I will say it looks really, really good. I'm really, really happy with how it's turning out. And at first, when I had kind of thought about I might need to frog this and I was in denial, I was like, no, I won't frog it. I'm just going to wear it. It'll be fine. And it took me about 24 hours to resign to the fact that I would actually be ripping this back, because I really like how it looks and I want it to turn out better than it currently is. So I think it will be worth it. And realistically, this is like a week's worth of work, which is not a lot. It's not that much. It didn't take me as long as I thought it would to get to this point, and it won't take me that long to get there again. So yeah, we're just going to restart. I am doing myself a kindness. I'm not going to force myself to rip this all out just yet. I've just wound up another skein and I'm going to start again with that, and once I need to start a new ball then I'll rip this out. I just can't really bring myself to rip this out right now, but I am keen to restart and keep pushing ahead with this. So to figure out how deep the shaped part of my back yoke, so that's the part with the German short rows, which turns out into a bit of a trapezoid shape, I need my row gauge, and my row gauge is 34 rows. So the widest part of my trapezoid had 144 stitches and started off with 48. With each German short row turn, I incorporated 2 extra stitches until I eventually reached 144 stitches. To figure out how many rows that is, you just subtract 48 from 144, and that's 96, and then you divide that by the number of stitches incorporated in each row. So in this case it's 2, and that equals 48. So that's 48 rows, and at my row gauge, 48 divided by 34, and then I multiply it by 10 because I'm working in centimetres as opposed to inches, and the answer is 14.1 centimetres. Alternatively, if I want to incorporate 3 stitches in every row, that's 96 divided by 3, which is 32. 32 divided by 34 multiplied by 10 is 9.4 centimetres. So there's a big difference in the trapezoid shape when I incorporate 3 stitches as opposed to 2 stitches in every row. I did look at all the other drop shoulder patterns that I've knit that are constructed this way, and using their row gauge and the number of rows that they have in that trapezoid part of the back yoke, I was able to calculate the depth of their back yoke, and it kind of ranges from anywhere from 6 to 15 centimetres. So 14 was definitely on the higher end, and I think I'd be much happier with a depth of 9.4 centimetres there. So I am going to restart it and I'll check back in with you when I have that done. Just as I took out my camera to film this today, there was a knock on the door and it was a delivery for me. So I ordered Amy Herzog's Ultimate Sweater book. I did a lot of research online to figure out what book I should get to help me draft this jumper, and a lot of people said this one. I got it and it literally just arrived today as I pulled out my camera to film. So talk about good timing. Okay, I'm going to restart my jumper now and I'll check back in when I have the back yoke done.
So here I'm just adjusting my chart so that the German short row turns occur every 3 stitches instead of every 2. And first I just fix the silhouette, and you can see straight away that the shoulder slope is way less steep, which is exactly what I wanted.
So it's been a while since I last recorded, and I'm currently in Krakow actually. I've just come in from the cold and I'm about to go out again, but I wanted to show you my back yoke, which I finished for the second time now. I blocked it, I've measured it, I'm really happy with the dimensions, and I think I'm good to keep going now and work on the front yoke. But there's a couple of things that I wanted to show you first, so I'll show you those right now. So this is it here. As I said, I've measured it, I blocked it, I'm really happy with all the dimensions. I'm pretty happy with the length of this bit here. I wasn't sure initially how to calculate how long to make that, but I just looked at other patterns that I own and made it the same length as the ones that have a similar fit to what I want this to fit like. So the next step now is to pick up along the front shoulders and start working the front yoke. I can always add more length to the back or take it away if I need to. So I'm going to work the front until the point that I need to, and then I'm going to make sure that everything lines up under the arm when it's kind of sitting on my shoulders the way it should. So hopefully that all works out. This is the original one, and you can see, sorry about the shadow, but there's not much I can do. It's just the overhead lighting. It's got a much steeper shoulder, and the diamond cables are both twisting the same way. They're both twisting to the right. It's hard to show them side by side because I am currently holding my phone up in the air to capture them both. But yeah, I hope you can see the difference there in the shoulder slope of the current sample versus the original one. And then I also change the diamond twists so that they're both twisting, like this one's twisting towards the right and this one's twisting towards the left. So the twist on each side matches the twist of the 2x2 cables on that side. So everything is kind of symmetrical and matching. I did make a small mistake with this sample, but it doesn't really bother me. It's just that the diamond chart is 2 stitches narrower on this one than on this one. It's fine for this sample. I think for the second sample that I make, I will want to have those 2 stitches in there because I just think the diamond looks a bit better when it's slightly bigger. I think you can definitely see a big difference in the height of this trapezoid, and I'm very happy with how this one looks so far. One thing that I did consider before, and I've now reached the point, is getting this diamond cable to look nice at the shoulder seam. So I'm really not sure how to do this because the front yoke has to kind of go up and over my shoulder and down the front, where it will match the length of this back yoke part, and they can be joined under the arm. That means that the front yoke has to be a specific length, but it also has to end on the same row as the back yoke in terms of this diamond cable chart. So I use my row gauge to calculate how long the front yoke part is going to be. I think it's about 79 rows. This diamond chart is 28 rows, so it fits, 79 rows will fit 2 full charts and 23 rows of a third. If I work backwards, starting from where the underarm join is, and considering that I will be kind of ending on this row here of the diamond chart, if I work backwards and think about 2 full diamond charts plus 23 rows of a third, I won't be at a point in the diamond chart that will match up exactly with this cable part up here. So there's 8 purl stitches between the knit sections of the diamond chart here, but on the front row I'll have to start a little further along the diamond chart to the point where there's only 4 purl stitches in between the knit stitches, if that makes sense. So it won't look like a cohesive diamond here. So that's where I am, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. So the first thing I wanted to show you is this diamond motif. As you can see, the left leg doesn't line up on the front versus the back, which is just a sacrifice that I'm willing to make with this particular sample. Working this sample is making me think about the things that I can plan ahead for. and this is one of them. So if I were to do this again, what I could do is, instead of starting the knit stitches here, let me get it closer, instead of starting the knit stitches here, I could start the knit stitches here, but just not cable them. I could just work them as knits and purls on either side until I get to the point at which they would join in this kind of diamond cable motif. I think that would look okay if I did that. And as I said, I'm not going to redo it. The other thing is that I've obviously made a mistake here with the cable direction, but I'm just going to leave it in. Initially I was trying to match it with the back cable, but I realized because it's on the front, I'll need to twist it the other way if I want it all to be twisting inwards. So I realized like very, very quickly, but I just figured I would keep it in for a little bit of personality. Finally, the third thing is this column of twisted stitches on the edge. It looks a bit funny, probably because it's on the edge, like this particular column here. Even though these twisted stitches are 3 stitches in, so the first stitch is a column of purls, which you can't see because it's twisted around. And then I've got 2 columns of twisted knit stitches. So the first one definitely looks a bit, looks less than ideal. But then the second column also doesn't look great. I mean, when you compare it to this column of twisted stitches here. So yeah, I think for my second sample, my gauge will be different because I'll be working with a slightly thicker yarn, and therefore I might not have these twisted knit stitches at the edge. But if I do, I'll figure out something to substitute them with.
I thought I would show you a little bit of my trip around Krakow. I couldn't bring myself to talk to my phone while I was walking around. I was just too embarrassed, so I'm going to record a little voiceover now. Anyway, it's much more interesting for you guys to be able to look at all of the sights that I was seeing instead of looking at my face for this whole segment. According to my weather app, it was 1 degree Celsius, but it felt like -1, and I really loved it. I was wrapped up pretty well for the weather. I was wearing my Musselburgh hat, which is definitely my warmest hat, and I was wearing my Vertices night shawl, which is not the warmest scarf to ever exist, but probably the warmest one that I own. And I was also wearing a pair of mittens that I semi-self-drafted last year based on a couple of different patterns. I really enjoy solo traveling, and when I do travel solo, I just kind of like to walk around, explore all the food and drink places. I don't really do a lot of sights when I'm by myself. I just kind of prefer to do those when I'm with people. On this particular trip, I did go to Auschwitz, but I didn't go to the salt mines or the Schindler Museum. I'll very likely come back here with my boyfriend and we can do those then.
Okay, we're back. It's day 3 in Krakow. I've been working away on this, and as you can see, I've joined the left and right fronts. So I just want to talk a bit about what I've done with the neckline. So I've worked about 1 inch after joining the left and right fronts, and I actually think I'm going to do the collar straight away just to make sure that all of my numbers are working out. At the moment it's actually looking a little bit big, but I kind of expected that, and I'm hoping that the ribbing will pull it in. I do think that these twisted stitches at the edge are distorting it. Like, you can see that these are kind of almost pushed, making the row gauge here bigger than what it is over here. So I'm hoping that the ribbing will kind of even that out. The same here, like the stitch gauge of my cast on is bigger than the stitch gauge of this honeycomb cable, and I did all my calculations based off the stitch gauge of the cable. So I'm hoping that, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, but we'll see once I actually do the ribbing. First I wanted to talk about the increases that I did for the neckline, and I've drawn out my maths here. So the neckline that I'm working is shaped like this. So I've got my back neck cast on, which is 16 centimeters wide. And based on other patterns that I've made, I decided that the front neck edge should be 9 centimeters. So that is along here. So that would mean that the back neck is 48 stitches across, and at this gauge 9 centimeters is equivalent to 28 stitches across. So in the increase section where I'm shaping the left and right fronts, I needed to increase by 10 stitches on each side for a total of 20 stitches increased. Typically I would have increased every 2 rows, so that would mean if I were to increase 1 stitch every 2 rows for a total of 10 stitches increased, that would be 20 rows. So that's basically this dotted line, this dotted vertical line here is representing the 20 rows, and the dotted horizontal line is representing the extra 10 stitches. And I used my secondary school maths here because I used Pythagoras theorem to calculate how long this diagonal length was going to be. So here I have 20 rows by my row gauge. I can't remember what it worked out at. It was like 3 point something centimeters. And then here I have 10 stitches by my stitch gauge, which again was like 3 point something centimeters. And I used a hypotenuse calculator to figure out that this was going to be 7 centimeters. Most of the patterns that I've knit, this diagonal edge works out to be between 3 to 5 centimeters, and I thought 7 centimeters would look a little bit too steep, and it would also make my neckline a little bit too low. I didn't want it coming down that low. I could always shorten that straight edge, I thought, but I figured I would prefer to have my diagonal length kind of match other patterns that I've knit, just for a better appearance, because I didn't like this really steep slope that it was going to give me. So I decided to make this diagonal edge 5.5 centimeters. And you can see I've done a little triangle here. I don't have my tripod or anything, so I can't write this while I'm filming, so I hope this is okay. But basically I drew out another isosceles triangle, and in this case the hypotenuse is 5.5 centimeters. The base is still 10 stitches because we're still increasing by 10 stitches, and I multiplied that by my stitch gauge to figure out the length of this. Again, I can't remember off the top of my head now, but it was like 3 point something. And then I left this as like a question mark. So now that I'm knowing the hypotenuse and the base, what is this length? And the answer was 4.2 centimeters. And if I converted that into rows at my row gauge, it's 14 rows. So then I need to figure out how to distribute 10 increases across 14 rows. And I literally just drew out my 14 rows and distributed the increases. So the X's here represent increases. So for the first 8 rows, I increased as I typically would, which is increasing every second row. And then from row 9, I increased every single row. So right side and wrong side, I was increasing. So that way I had 10 increases spaced out among 14 rows. The additional effect of that is that for the first 8 rows where I was increasing every other row, you would have 1 increase rate. And then once you start increasing every single row, you'd have another increase rate. And then at the bottom, you have that horizontal part for stitches. And so I kind of thought it would give me a nice curve here instead of just a straight diagonal line. I don't know if you can actually tell that that's what the effect is, but I was just happy that I was able to get 10 increases into a diagonal length that I was happy with. So that's that. I'm about to head out again. I'm going to find a coffee shop and I'm going to knit my collar, and I'll check back in. Okay, so I'm actually pretty happy with this. This turned out better than I had hoped, because I was just afraid that I had done the calculations wrong. The whole purpose of me doing the collar now is to see if it was going to pull in the neck hole as much as I wanted it to, and it does. It is flaring a tiny bit, or it feels like it is. It feels like there might be too many stitches picked up, especially on the back. I picked up 1 stitch in every stitch across, but I'm not sure if it's because the cables kind of tighten the gauge that I need to pick up even less than 1 stitch in every stitch. So I might redo it, but for now it's all good. I'm going to keep working on the front. I'm going to join under the arms. At some point I will block it again and see what the collar turns out like then, but yeah, as for now, I'm pretty happy with this.